Gracie Jiu-Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 128 of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. Today my guest will be Scotty Nelson, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But before we do, let's start with our jiu-jitsu quote. And that quote is, BJJ is not about being better than someone else. It's about being better than you used to be. And that's from Anonymous, and I really love that quote. Good one to keep in mind for sure. All right, Scotty Nelson is a BJJ pioneer. He formed On the Mat, one of the first successful jiu-jitsu websites and technique platforms back in 1997, and has traveled the world contributing to jiu-jitsu in a multitude of ways. He's a black belt under Jeff Glover and has had a huge impact on various aspects of jiu-jitsu and MMA. In this interview, we discuss his cancer hospital, CHPSA, what it is and how he got involved in it, complementary therapies and treatments for cancer, mind-body medicine, and some of the pioneers of mind-body medicine, such as Bernie Siegel, emotional intelligence, what it is and its impact it's had on his life, his relationship with Henry Akins, living in Brazil in the early days of BJJ and MMA, his gi company and brand, Lucky Gi, something that's had a huge impact on his life, what he's most proud of, and what he wants to be remembered for. There's also a short cameo from the one and only Jeff Glover. So I know you're going to enjoy this interview. After the interview, make sure you stay tuned for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. And now, without further ado, let's talk to Scotty. Okay, I'm speaking with Scott Nelson, who is very well known throughout the jiu-jitsu world, having been involved in the art for many, many years in various ways. So welcome, Scott.
Hey, thanks, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time to do it for sure. So, Scott, we'll get into jiu-jitsu in a bit. I want to start off by talking about something you're involved in now, which you're very passionate about, and it's something that means a great deal to you. And I'm talking about the CHPSA Hospital. So tell us about that. What exactly is CHPSA, and how did you get involved in it?
CHPSA Hospital is a integrative cancer hospital. I've been involved with them for about 5 years ago. I'm one of the owners in the hospital, and basically my friend Ed Clay, who was, he used to own Nashville MMA, black belt in jiu-jitsu, fought MMA and Shuto, also used to own Gameness. Basically, his mom was really sick, and she had rheumatoid arthritis, and she was dying, but she wasn't dying from the actual disease. She was dying from the medications they were giving her and not having good reactions to them. So Ed, super smart guy, went down the rabbit hole, found out about a treatment from the early, 1900s for rheumatoid arthritis. There was one hospital in North America that had been using it for 40 years. The treatment was unpatentable and no longer available in the United States. So, Ed said, come check this hospital out. I was looking to do something a little bit different. And, his mom turned out to be the second patient. And she came in a wheelchair. 3 weeks later, she left walking. And I only had to see a couple of those down there when I was like, hey, man, this is amazing. Um, you know, I want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of it full time. And, I always felt like in jujitsu, by bringing people to the mat and getting them training, in a lot of ways, I've had people tell me like, "Oh, you got me started training, man. Like, it really saved my life." And that was always something that I loved about martial arts and about jujitsu, is that people can change their lives really quickly, no matter where they're starting at. I always felt, but here was a chance to take it to like a real level of, literally pulling people out of the grave, people that were given up on wherever they were from, ran out of treatment options. And because Mexico has kind of more of like a right to try medical law, you can use cutting edge and experimental medicine there a lot easier than you can in the US. So, I just got involved with it because I love to help people, and it was a chance to help people on a whole nother level.
Yeah, that's definitely the best reason to get involved in it. Yeah, U.S. tends to be a lot more restrictive, I think, with some newer cutting edge kind of things. Process takes a lot longer and a lot more hoops to jump through to get to use some of the newer things. Tell us a little bit more about where it is. I know you said Mexico, and sometimes Mexico gets a little bit of a bad rap as far as people doing medical tourism down there, but you've seen the other side of it. You've seen a lot of success with that hospital and the therapies you guys are doing. So talk a little more in depth about why it ended up at that location, but also some of the specific therapies or modalities you guys use to treat cancer.
Sure. So, the hospital that we purchased is called Chipsa Hospital, and it's what's called the original Gerson Hospital. There was a German doctor named Dr. Max Gerson, and he's probably the most, the most well-known, widely used alternative cancer treatment is called Gerson therapy. And it's a diet-based therapy. It's basically all plant-based, 13 fresh pressed juices a day, 5 coffee enemas a day. So the hospital was originally founded by Charlotte Gerson, who was the daughter of the Dr. Max Gerson. And that's how they primarily started out, was a diet-based cancer therapy. And it's also used for lupus and a lot of other diseases. Then the hospital became more advanced, and they added things beyond just the diet therapy. The one that helped out Ed Clay's mom is actually called Coley's fluid or Coley's toxins. It's Dr. William Coley, who used to work at Sloan Kettering, developed it as a cancer therapy. And really all it is it's a dead bacteria. And you take the dead bacteria and you put it either under the skin in the person's system, or in cancer, we put it directly into the tumor. And so I'm going to preface this right now as I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I'm just a jiu-jitsu guy that bought a hospital and wants to help people. So if I explain any of this wrong, all you trolls or haters, I'm telling you up front that I'm not a doctor. Okay. So, but basically the dead bacteria, when dealing with cancer, it alerts the immune system that there's something there to attack. And so our goal at our hospital is, our hospital is set up a lot like a fight camp, like an MMA fight camp. Of course, Ed was a really high level, coached UFC guys in the UFC and people all over the world in boxing, Thai boxing, MMA, and jiu-jitsu. And so we've set up that way, and we don't have our hospital. We're not alternative. We're not conventional. We're integrative. And basically it's just like the old school Valley Tudo and old school jiu-jitsu. If a treatment works, we keep it. If it doesn't work, we don't use it. And then we look for things that work synergistically and together for the treatments. So, as former athletes, absolutely diet means something. Could you imagine being a high level coach nowadays and saying to your fighter or whatever the athlete is, doesn't matter what you eat whatever you want. You'd be the laughing stock of the fight world. Or imagine we also focus a lot on power of the mind and mental training. These patients are in the fight of their lives. So we have mental coaches for them. 3 days a week, we have a Power of the Mind class. And we also have 4 psychologists on staff. So we support not just the fighter, the patient, but also their companion. We call them supporters. And everybody at home, we help create the little fight camp for them at home. So we do things like really differently at our hospital. I mean, could you imagine being, again, you're an MMA coach and you try to tell you, hey, your mental game doesn't matter. Don't worry if you're scared to death. It doesn't matter if you think you're going to win or not. Like you'd be, again, the laughing stock. And it's the same thing with treatment modalities. These people are in the fight of their life. If you were sending somebody to fight in the cage and you were only a jiu-jitsu guy or only a karate guy, and you said, hey, in modern day MMA to win this fight, all you need is karate or all you need is jiu-jitsu. Like, again, you'd be the laughing stock. But for some reason in the medical world, the fight game isn't looked at the same as it is for us fighters. So because of that, we've been able to attract some really, really high level doctors and scientists that work with us because they do really appreciate how we look at everything, every part of, the patient. We even have music therapy. That's great, man. At our hospital. When the patients are eating, we have, there's a 501c3 called Hope Song, hopesong.org, and they bring patients out to cancer hospitals and they bring musicians out to cancer hospitals and they play live music while the patients are eating to make them more comfortable and more relaxed. Nothing's better than music to change how you feel. And a big part of, dealing with disease is, getting these people to feel better, in their head, heart, and soul. So,
yeah, you really got to look at the nervous system, and we tend to be overstimulated chronically, in this country with the nervous system, and it leads to so many different things, either causes or contribute. So I love your approach, the all-encompassing, well-rounded, and treating it like a fight camp. You use what's useful. I love that approach. And the power of the mind. So let me tell a little bit about my background, because I've seen a lot of what I want to call both sides, although now with your approach, it's not really one or the other. It's kind of complementary, which I love. So I was a medic in the Army years ago. I have a master's in nursing. I was a stress management counselor for Duke University Medical Systems, Cardiac Rehab and Wellness, a certified health coach, and I had my own integrated wellness practice for years. And I don't say that to sound important or anything. It's just that I've seen kind of conventional medicine, and I'm old enough to have been around where it was conventional, and there's, because of the politics, traditional medicine really hated acupuncture, chiropractor, anything things considered alternative. I've seen a lot of change throughout the years, and I've done a lot of complementary myself. But I like the integrated approach. I've seen some of that in the States over the last 15, 20 years with people like Dr. Andrew Weil. Even in his medical school curriculum, it's an integrated approach. However, because of a lot of factors like politics, the U.S. is very slow to incorporate some of those things. You and I were talking briefly about the power of the mind and the mind-body medicine. One of my people that I've really followed for years was Bernie Siegel, and he was a traditional surgeon, cancer surgeon, and head of staff at New England Memorial. And way before a lot of other people kind of came on board with the whole mind-body thing, he wrote books like Love, Medicine, Miracles, Peace, Love, and Healing. And he started really getting into the power of the mind. He started a support group called Exceptional Cancer Patients, and he used drawings and guided imagery. But one of the other things he espoused was when you get kind of a life sentence, which cancer could be, a lot of people, in his books he documented that a lot of people, when they started living their own script and not living somebody else's life script. But, if you think you're going to die in 6 months and you decide to not do what you've done all your life for someone else, but you're going to do what you want to do, whether it's being a gardener or whatever your dream was, he saw miraculous turnarounds just by that emotional and psychological and spiritual aspect being groomed and taken care of and supported. And the power of the mind is just incredible.
It's so important, and like one thing when I never knew about nocebo. Do you know what nocebo is?
It's like placebo, but different.
It's so nocebo is talked about is when, they do these clinical trials and people get the placebo but then they develop all of the side effects that they're told that
Right.
it could have, even to the point they try to sue. Um, so like they got the placebo, they got the sugar pill, they developed their mind, developed these bad side effects from it. Like, how crazy is that? So
That's
that just
wild.
shows how powerful, the mind
Oh,
really is. And by leaving it out of the equation and healing,
mm-hmm.
just no wonder it breaks. No wonder it falls apart.
There's a guy named Norman Cousins who wrote a book called Anatomy of an Illness. He had a debilitating condition and was in a lot of pain daily. And he started researching laughter. And he started watching old Marx Brothers movies and other things daily. And he found that just 10 minutes a day of just laughter profoundly impacted his pain. So I love hearing like stories like this that various aspects of healthcare and working with the whole person can really affect the immune system, the nervous system, and your health. Let's talk a little bit about the nutrition aspect. There's a doctor, Dr. Jason Fung, and he has written a lot about fasting in cancer, intermittent fasting, long-term fasting. So to me, it's not only what you're putting in your body, which is extremely important, because if you have your traditional American diet, you're putting so much crap in your body, making so many toxins. So we got to eliminate putting a lot of junk in our bodies, but also we got to choose what we put in, but also not putting things in, right? So fasting can looks like it can have a major effect. He talks about, and I want to get your opinion on this. He talks about traditionally a lot of people consider cancer a genetic disease, but he believes it's more of a metabolic and hormonal disease. And for example, if you took someone from a culture, say Japan, and where they would have a lower risk of cancer in general, if they moved over to the States, within 1 to 2 generations, their offspring would have the same amount of risk as Americans. And their genetics haven't had time to change that quickly, but the environment, their food, and their lifestyle has. So that speaks to what we've done, and not to bash America, but we've just kind of been misguided as far as our healthcare for many years and how to take care of ourselves. And I think that we really see that come into play.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I had a conversation once with a MD Anderson oncologist that was convinced that diet played, no part in it. And I was like, hey, man, we got some stairs over here we run. Any day you want to go run them, I'm going to drink a fresh juice. You're going to drink a soda, and we're going to go run these stairs and see who feels better. Like, how's that for some science, doctor?
Exactly.
I just know, just from training, any of us have trained hard. You put garbage in, you get garbage out. Like, when you got to get that emergency meal in at the fast food place before you go train, you pay. you
do pay
for sure. Yeah. So we focus a lot on our hospital on detox, liver detox, heavy metal detox, just really everything organic, and just, do our best to, not only do you got to not be putting it in, but you got to get the years of buildup, out. So I've heard of intermittent fasting for cancer. It's not something that we use, currently at our hospital. Most of the patients that come to our hospital have done what's called failed standard of care, which means in the United States, they said, we no longer have any treatment that we think will benefit you to getting any healthier. Or in other words, we give up. And they just kind of tell the patient to go to hospice and get their stuff together. And for the patients that, that they want to fight, they don't consider that their last round, then they're forced to leave the country. So people go to Europe, people come to Mexico. The United States is behind the times in a lot of areas.
In emergency medicine, they're world class. If you get hit by a car, you definitely want to be here. But as far as chronic, long-term, degenerative things, it's definitely been behind the times.
Yeah. I mean, what we do with stem cells, we don't use stem cells for cancer, but we treat autoimmune diseases. And of course, with all of us we have so many jiu-jitsu guys and fighters that work at the hospital too, that we treat a lot of people with stem cell stuff. And we had a guy that was on our scientific advisory board, a Russian doctor who was very, very advanced in stem cell stuff. And, just what they're doing with stem cells today and the technology like this, everything is moving lightning speed. For some reason in America, when our healthcare, we accept these 15 to 30, 40-year-old treatments just because they've always been there. I mean, could you imagine if you walked into Best Buy and you saw a brand new MacBook Pro or iMac, but you weren't allowed to buy it because it hadn't been turned on for 15 years yet. So we don't know what the long-term thing is with this computer. But I got this, Commodore 64 or TRS-80 that doesn't go on the internet, whatever, Apple IIc that you can buy from 20, 30 years ago. People would go crazy. Or cars. Imagine, hey, here's this Tesla, but you can't buy it. Here's this 1970s car. So I don't know. Yeah, it's crazy. The system in America, it's broken. And maybe one of the good things that comes out of this whole COVID situation is that a lot of these medical restrictions are being changed. Doctors can now go from state to state without having to retest and spend a ton of money. Telemedicine can now be used, more, and telemedicine can be used cross state lines as well. So, hopefully there's some good in the healthcare that comes from this. They're pushing drugs through the FDA so fast right now. And before they said, oh, it's impossible to do. It takes 10, 15 years to get a drug out. Well, we're getting a vaccine out somehow in a matter of months. So it's not impossible, right?
That's right.
It's possible. So
it certainly has opened
it's like
up
the
a lot of
5-minute mile.
That's exactly
5-minute mile. So
yep.
It's good.
That's a great example. The limitations that are there, either externally or internally, until it happens, and then it just opens everything wide open.
Yeah, I mean, it's living impossibility. Like, hey, if you immediately think something is impossible, of course it's impossible, right? Mm-hmm. But if we stay open, maybe it can happen.
Absolutely. So you mentioned a lot of MMA people are involved in the hospital. Anybody you can share?
Well, Dominic Cruz, we're also opening some hospitals in the United States. We were getting ready to open what's called United Cancer Centers in the States. And we're the first institution that will be leveraging the new law that was passed by the president called Right to Try. Nice. And that new law allows any patient who has failed that standard of care it gives them the legal right to ask companies to try their experimental drugs, as long as they've passed at least a phase 1 trial, right? So at least they know it doesn't hurt people. You can do it. So we've been building our fight team of doctors for that, and we were getting ready to put that into motion right before all this pandemic happened. And actually, Dominic Cruz was one of the investors into that hospital. And there's a lot of guys different guys that come down there. But, we got Perry Briggs, I think, is a brown belt that's works with us. Pablo Santana's a purple belt. We got little Jack Series, a white belt. And we have some of our doctors and staff from Mexico now training down at there's a jiu-jitsu hostel called Lifestyle Jiu-Jitsu, which is in the small town of Playas, where our hospital is. And those guys are really cool. So we get over there and train with them, and we got some of our staff over there training with them. It just makes sense to have fighters around, people that are fighting for their lives.
Wow. So, I like the analogy of the two, and it sounds like exciting things going on there, man.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, you should come down and check it out sometimes. If you're like me, an old jiu-jitsu guy, you got some broken parts, and we got all kinds of stuff to take care of broken fighters down there. And we always hook up all the, guys that come down and make sure that everything's as affordable as possible. We've done some work with people with head injuries because we have hyperbaric oxygen chamber there. And, we have the PRP. And of course, if somebody is not being tested by USADA or anything, then, we can help with hormone levels and TRT and, growth hormone, and just, get all your blood tested, get everything done, and see how you can manage to try to live a little healthier, try to live a little longer.
Very cool. Very cool. I'd love to visit there sometime. Yeah, very exciting. I'll definitely put, a link in the show notes, and we'll definitely help spread the word about the exciting work that you guys are doing there.
Sure. Cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah. So I believe that I remember I was talking to Henry Akins one time, and I think he was saying that you and he went through the same emotional intelligence EQ training together. Isn't that right?
We did,
Yeah,
yes,
tell me a
out
little
here
bit
in
about
Las Vegas.
tell us a little bit about that, what that experience was like, and what it is, and what that experience was like for you guys.
I mean, for me, it was probably one of the single best things that I've ever done in my whole life. At the time before I went in to do it, I was kind of in a dark place in my life. I was making gis in China, and the manufacturer there, like, just literally to save like 3 to 5 cents a yard, use some um, cheaper fabric, and I had about like 900 pairs of gi pants rip. My first bamboo gis that had ever been put on the market, and they all the pants ripped on every single pair. It was a nightmare, and that was going on. And then I had found out this girl that I've been dating with had been cheating on me, and then I found out that my mom had a really short period of life
Wow.
left to live because she had a brain disease. And like, it's so like, you ever get that point in your life where you just feel like life is just beating you down into the corner,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
but we got to fight back. And Khalil Roundtree, UFC fighter Khalil, you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
So he had done the program. He was managing my Las Vegas OTM fight shop. And he's like, yo, you got to go check this thing out, man. And he badgered me into going, and thank God that he did. And, it's just been a really amazing thing for me in my life. You go in, you do exercises, and you discover, like, what I call, like, what I made up about the world. And, Dr. Goldman, who's like the big EQ Harvard doctor, says that, between the ages of 7 and 14 is when, as kids, we make up how the world is. And then we, go sailing through life on that foundation of judgment. And the good thing is that you can find out what that is, and you can change it, So I had a period of life in my life where, like, there was some crazy stuff going on in my family. I grew up in the Middle East, and I lived in Iran, and Iran had taken hostages, and my dad was stuck over there. And so because of certain things that happened to me when I was, a little kid, I felt abandoned by my mom and by my parents. And so, like, I made up, if I love somebody too much, a woman too much, then they don't love me, then I'm going to get abandoned and I need to run away. So, like, all these things that I realized, that we do these exercises to realize, like, stuff that I made up in my head, and my emotional response to life was coming because of that made up stuff. So, like, Dr. Goldman says, it comes from, when we were all tribal and hunting, and you and I are out on the Savannah plain and we're hunting, and all of a sudden a lion comes out and eats Scott. And so your brain makes up sea lion run,
Yes.
and that's hard looped into your brain for a good reason. But we're not in that survival mode of life, right? Our lives have evolved around us. Technology has evolved around us, but our brains are still these brains that, like, still work the same way they did when we were all living in tribes in a much more primitive time. So it's a great course, man. I suggest anybody do it. Like, that took off for me and got me going into the hospital. And there's no way I could have worked around dying cancer patients and been there to support so many of those people if I didn't have this emotional intelligence training. And even right now, like, in this whole craziness that's going on, the tools that I learned in there, they help me every day.
That's awesome.
In this, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with it. I haven't gone to that course, but I've read a lot about it and had some training. And, once we discover kind of the limitations we're imposing on ourselves because of the filters we have, like you said, based on experiences that have happened, and those filters get in place, and we see the world through those lenses. But once we can kind of look at the ones that aren't serving us well or aren't very healthy, change that out, and it opens up all possibilities in your life.
It certainly does. I couldn't agree with you more. And for me, like, the craziest thing was, like, finding the filters that I didn't even believe were there. Mm-hmm. Like, if you would have told me before the class, like, hey, like, this happened to you, made you do this and think about this, I'd be like, what are you talking about? But oh yeah, it did, like, it's so finding those filters and then and being able to change them. Yeah. Super. super powerful. Definitely made me a way happier, like way more emotionally balanced person, I feel.
That's it. Emotionally balanced. It's
Yeah.
self-discovery is a beautiful thing, man. It's a little bit like jiu-jitsu
Hmm.
too. Once you could be on some level and you're doing jiu-jitsu and you've learned some things, but then someone else shows you some other aspects. It could be a technique, or it could just be a concept or a principle, and or something as simple as say, "Hey, wrist locks," and you're like, "Wow, that was always there." I'm around. I'm
Yeah.
doing this all the time. I never knew that was there, and it was just a limitation in your vision and your understanding. But once it opens up, you're like, "Wow, it's a whole different thing." Same with life, right?
To me, it's exactly like the jiu-jitsu. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, but it's even a little bit different for me there. It's like, it's exactly like training with Henry Akins, and I'm doing the most simple move that I learned when I was a white belt. And he's like, why are you doing it that way? And you have to realize, oh, well, because I've always done it this way, because
Yeah.
I was taught this way. And I never, at that time, I was so new learning it that who would I be to second guess the whatever belt higher than I was that, taught me how to do it. But he has such a different way of looking at jujitsu and breaking jujitsu down that all the time I'm like, so like it was just like you said, oh my God, it was just right there. And I never opened my eyes to it, I never even tried to look for it.
Isn't that cool when you've been doing something for a long time and you feel like you have some level of understanding, and then someone like Henry shows you something completely different, or it's much more depth about it, and it completely changes the whole thing for you? That's awesome.
I hate it. I know it's
I
not
hate
cool. It
it.
means for 25, 6, 7, how many years I've been doing this, I was doing the simplest move inefficiently, if not completely
Oh,
wrong.
that's funny. That's funny. I, I I find myself talking about Henry a lot on my show, with good reason. So tell me a little bit about that relationship you have with him and how you guys kind of met and that kind of thing.
I met Henry because, Gumby, Alan Marquez, my partner at onthemat.com, he had met Henry and Maddie, Henry's brother, somewhere along the lines before I had. And we were all going to go compete in a Joe Morera tournament in Irvine, California. And Henry let us sleep on his floor. So we drove from San Jose all the way down to LA and crashed on his floor. And it was like a jujitsu compound of people all over the place, barely any room on the floor. And then we all went and competed in the tournament and stuff. And, that was really cool because back then, like this is probably like 97 or maybe 98. And it was like you weren't even supposed to talk to people from other teams, let alone be nice enough to let them stay at your house or anything like that. And so, Henry and I have been friends like ever since then. And, actually I had one point in my life where I'd moved back from Brazil and trying to figure out a place to live and I've been in Brazil 3 years. So to pick up again from nothing in the United States. And Henry, I was homeless, sleeping in my car, training, selling DVDs and gis out of the back of my car, sometimes sleeping in academies. And Henry was like, yo, come live at my house, dude. So he let me live at his house for a few months. And,
Nice.
we've just been really good friends ever, the whole time, all the way through jiu-jitsu. He came and spent time with me down in Brazil a couple times while I was living there. And we trained and did stuff there too.
That's great, man. What a great friendship you guys sound like you have. It's nothing like having people like that in your life and being there for you.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
so you mentioned Brazil. Let's touch just a little bit on your time. You were one of the first Americans to take up and head down to Brazil to study jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's how you define first. I would say I was the first guy to go down there when the internet was getting popular and the first guy to put it out in the media and write about it. There's definitely other guys that had been, down there. Bob Anderson is probably the first, jujitsu, became a jujitsu guy, but was a wrestler that went down there, catch wrestler too. But yeah, before I got down there, the people that really helped me out were like Amal Easton and Alberto Crane had been down there for a while. When I first got to Brazil, 99, I was the only gringo there on the mat, really. My friend Mickey O'Riggs went with me and we, but then Alberto and Amal showed up and they already spoke Portuguese and they'd been up in Belo Horizonte. And so, I think I get a little bit more credit than is due as being one of the first Americans in Brazil, but I was definitely the first guy to go down there and take pictures and upload videos and go to all the different events and write articles and just talk about it,
That's cool. What would you say was the biggest challenge for you during that time? And also what would the highlight was? What was the coolest thing about being down there during that time?
Man, I mean, just getting to know another culture, speak another language, and that was probably the biggest growth for me. Like really learning more about Brazil and Brazilians and Brazil outside of jiu-jitsu. I actually traveled all the way up to Manaus in the Amazon and spent time in the Amazon, and then all the way in between, tried to go to like most of Brazil, all the way down to Florianopolis in the south of Brazil, trained at jiu-jitsu schools from one end to the other, surfed from one end to the other. So, it was just a real adventure. The people were awesome. So that was, just a really cool event overall. Good part of my life. The unfortunately for Brazil, but fortunately for me, the real, the Brazilian dollar like plummeted while I was there. So, when everything's 75% off, you can live a little different lifestyle.
Yeah, makes it a lot easier.
So I was buying gis in Brazil at 75% off, shipping them to the US and, selling them online at a time where it's still really hard to get gis, period.
Wow. Wow.
So.
And that led you eventually to starting your gi brand, Lucky Gi? Or how exactly did that come to play?
I wanted to make my own gis. I used to hang out and train a lot with the Penn brothers, BJ and Reagan and JD, and BJ and I would always talk gis, and he would have different gis from Brazil and I would have different gis, and we would talk about what we liked about ones and what we liked about others. And BJ had never ended up starting a gi company and went on to do everything we know he did. And I just kept going with it. And, back in the early days, you couldn't buy a jiu-jitsu gi online or anything. And you'd have to wait for some Brazilians to bring some. And then if you were a white belt, then you got you were the last person to choose the gi that you wanted. And sometimes you had to shrink a big one down to make it fit. And so I just looked at the way the gis were being made, and I just wanted to make something that was more my personality and more what I thought was cool and change the fit. Back then, a lot of the gis seemed like they would rip a lot more than they do now. And I was living right off the San Francisco Bay. There was actually a sail shop for racing sailboats right by my house. And I took a whole stack of ripped up gis in there one day and sat down with this woman who sewed sails for racing sailboats. And she showed me how to like reinforce the pants and reinforce the top so that it wouldn't, rip. And these are all things that like I added into the gi that now every single gi for the most part has. I put the karate pants, triple gusset crotch so you could do a split in jiu-jitsu pants. They didn't used to have them. Mm-hmm. That was something that BJ and Dave Camarillo used to always complain about because they're so flexible and they try to, open their legs way up and the pants would catch and design wise, I just wanted to make it, cool, more my style. So inside print, contrast stitching, one piece top, these are all like standard now. Everybody does it, but,
and you were the first one to do this. Wow. That's pretty
We were the first one to put them all together. There was companies that had one piece tops. Gotcha. Nobody had done like the sport cut. All gis were kind of like trash bags with armholes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I went to a tailor and he showed me how to change the pattern to give it that V cut on it. So
very cool. And what about bamboo? Are most years now bamboo, or is that just certain ones? Or what?
We do a bamboo blend now. We do a hemp, and we do a cotton poly blend as well.
Very cool. So Scotty, who or what would you say has had the biggest impact on your life? And this can be on or off the mat. And it could be a person, or it could be an event, or just something that stands out as like, bam, really made a major impact in your life.
Oh man, that's like a trick question, dude. You got to give me some more like guidelines than that, because you like answer that question wrong. Like
All
my
right.
dad will hear this and be
Sure,
pissed.
sure,
And
sure. So let's
you
start
know,
with let's start with events. Is there something that stands out that you knew, wow, life's going to be different after this? It just had that kind of impact on you.
yeah. So when I was 9 years old, man, I was living in Tehran, Iran, and my dad had a job over there. And the Iranian embassy got taken twice. And at 9 years old, um, with my 6 year old younger brother, my parents were forced to put my brother and I by ourselves on an airplane. And we went from, I believe it was from Tehran to Heathrow to New York to Texas, Houston, Texas, where my grandparents, were living. And then my mom got out, but my dad got stuck in the country, um, in between these two hostage takings of the embassy over there. And that's the first time I remember, like as a kid, like being like, oh, things are things are going to be different, after this. Like, why are we having to run away from our, home? I grew up with a kind of a crazy life. I went to 17 schools before I graduated high school. I went to 4 high schools in 4 years. So I got really good at being the new guy, which meant two things. You had to make friends fast, and you're probably going to get in a fight pretty quickly,
Wow.
too. So
That became the
uh,
norm, huh?
I got beat up some in high school, and I beat some up in high school. But I was a pretty little guy, so mostly just got that would be the first time. And right now I don't think anything's gonna. People say, when are we going back to normal? Like for me, I feel like this is the new normal. Like we need to get used to how life is right now, and basically just figure out how to evolve, right? Like how to evolve to make this work. Part of that emotional intelligence, right, is
Mm-hmm.
just not getting stuck on the past and what used to be.
So true. That's so true. And that's a big point, getting back to normal, but there is no going back to that normal. And this situation is certainly going to change things a lot. It already has, and it will continue to. So I think you're right. We have to evolve and roll with it, and be willing to open our eyes and look at things from a different perspective, right?
Absolutely. Don't be a victim. Be active, be proactive, So it's just like jujitsu, right? If you just lie there waiting for something to happen, you're not going to win, right?
Exactly.
You better be proactive and reactive. So,
And at the same time, know when it's okay just to be defensive for a bit too, right? Sometimes
you
that's the
got
best
it.
course of action.
Absolutely.
So, what? Couple things, and these are another few questions that might be like, all right, whatever. You're gonna have to
Go
rephrase
ahead.
that.
I'll do my best.
So,
Yeah.
what are you the most proud of? If you're looking over your life, you've done a ton of stuff. So, what are you most proud of looking back over your life, and what do you want to be remembered for, Scotty?
Oh gosh, what am I most proud? I mean, well, real short, like I'm most proud of like recreating my relationship with my dad, like as I got older and learning how to realize that like my parents were never given the how to raise Scott,
Mm,
manual. And part of
mm,
that is like that victim thing, like, oh, like I never had a home. I moved every couple months, type thing. And so like getting, beyond that. But also like on a bigger scale, of course, what we're doing at the hospital, like I'm most proud of the fact that we have built a business and a team and a family of people that really, really care about their patients. And, every patient's, success story, of course, we could always do better, man. I pray every day, every night, for better results and better treatments. But for the people that get their life back, and they get their family back, the ripple effect of, someone gets to keep their mom, somebody gets to keep their daughter, that whole family unit that gets to stay together, and what I will be remembered for is part of a group of people that brought that to the United States and brought respect for the patient and the healing process, back to the United States to help people here. Over 600,000 people a year in the United States fail standard of care just in cancer. So that's 600,000 people. Like we're worried about whatever we're at with coronavirus right now. As far as I know, it's nowhere near 600,000.
Right.
But like that, people, could you imagine if every time somebody died of cancer, 1,800 people a day or whatever it is, there was a news story about it?
Yeah.
People would think cancer was dropping out of the sky.
Seriously.
And stuff. So, I want to be remembered for, being part of the solution and fixing that, healthcare problem. And, and in jiu-jitsu, I think one of the things, like what I kind of known as, or what I would like to be remembered as, is that, for the first layer of us gringos, the first, crew of people that were out there, I always did my best to, get behind where I saw talent and get behind the guys that I thought were being mistreated by the establishment, by the sport. Like I'm not really sure, how to say it, but tournaments were different back then, and it was hard for American guys. Brazilian companies weren't sponsoring American guys or supporting American guys, so we had to, come up with our own brands. And there's a lot of guys that have done it really well since I started.
Man, what an awesome answer. I mean, beautiful. You have certainly had a major impact on tons of lives out there, and you're doing it for the right reasons. A lot of times if you ask that question, what are you most proud of? It's easy to invoke some ego, right? And start someone listing a lot of things, and which is fine, but you're really proud of the impact you've had on so many lives, and for the right reason. That impact, not necessarily your accomplishment, but what you're really doing for people. And I love that attitude. It's great.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you real quick. You were talking about having to constantly adjust, going, from place to place, new schools and all that. Are you by nature more introverted or extroverted?
Oh, I'm extroverted. I'm a ENTP.
Yeah.
So, no, ENTPJ. So
well,
I guess I only make up like 3% of the population.
Right.
So yeah, I'm extroverted. I'm way on the extroverted. I don't know if I just became extroverted. I had to.
That could be, but
in order to make friends.
I was going to say that at least that made it easier, because if you would have been like a real introvert, that could have been so much harder going, having to adjust, move that often and go to new schools every year and all that.
I mean, nothing made it easy. I just grew up with that being the normal, and it's really wasn't until, people ask me like, where are you from? I have to say, like, you mean, where was I born? Where did I live the longest? Because, at like 4 years old, I was already on the road. So, it's been cool. I lived in more countries, by the time I graduated from high school than probably most people ever get to visit.
Yeah.
And I've continued on that traveling lifestyle. But it's definitely different.
Well, not that I would wish that on anybody as far as that amount of travel, but I do think travel is just amazing for people to experience, because it just opens up your whole world and viewpoint so much.
100%. Yeah, man.
Is Jeff Glover still with you?
Jeff Glover. Yeah. He's around here somewhere. He came out here.
Pull him in and say hello to us.
Okay. Hold on. I got to take you off my earphone buds here real quick.
I'll just say a quick hello to him.
Hey, yo, shout out to Lucky Gee. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know what's going on.
Absolutely.
Shout out to Lucky Gees holding it down for the Gringos and the Brazilians too, though, man. Scotty takes care of everybody.
Awesome. Jeff, how's it going?
Hey, man, we holding it down out here. You know what I'm saying? Corona 2020. We living it up. We doing it right. You know what I'm saying?
Right on. Big fan, man. What do you got going on right now?
I'm just hanging out with Scotty, man.
That's the
got
best
all
thing
my
to
seminars. All my seminars got canceled. So just chilling, I guess. I'm not essential, bro.
He's not essential, but he's teaching online classes to people and answering questions on techniques and stuff all over Instagram, doing his part for sure.
Right on. Well, thanks for saying hello. I appreciate it, Jeff. Love to have you on at some point as well, man.
Cheers, brother. Anytime.
All right. Scotty, man, thanks for taking your time, letting us get to know a little more about you and what you got going on. And man, you're truly making a huge impact. So hats off to you and much respect, my friend.
All right, man. Thank you. Lots of love. And if you guys need anything, hit us up. Hopefully everyone's safe and healthy.
All right, my friend. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Cheers. All right. Really enjoyed that conversation with Scotty. I think his hospital is very interesting, and I believe they're going to continue to help a lot of people through that work. I'll put a link in the show notes for anyone interested in supporting that work. Up next is the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. All right, time now for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. And today I'll be featuring another of Robert Van Valkenburg's posts from his Holistic Buddha blog. This one is titled, Hope is a Tool That Can Be Borrowed. Our capacity for love and joy is the same as our capacity for heartache and pain. It is impossible to open our hearts to the possibility of loving and being loved by others without also opening our hearts to the possibility of being hurt as well. We cannot experience the fullness of the former without making ourselves vulnerable to the latter. In order to open our hearts to love and joy, we must also open our hearts to pain and loss. If we are to experience everything life has to offer in terms of happiness, passion, and joy, we will also eventually experience everything life has to offer in terms of sorrow, heartbreak, and grief. It is a package deal, and there is no way around it. But there is a way through it. The way to navigate through the peaks and the valleys of love and loss, joy and grief, of passion and pain, is with hope. Hope may not be a strategy, but it is a tool. Even when all seems lost and there appears to be no way out of the pain, the hurt, and the heartbreak that we will inevitably experience if we live with our hearts open, as long as we can find some glimmer of hope, some flicker of optimism, some spark of belief that things can improve, that this may eventually pass, and that there is even the possibility of a reason to go on, we will come out on the other side. The secret is that hope does not need to come from us for it to carry us through even our worst moments, because hope is so powerful a tool that it can actually be borrowed from others and still be effective. All right, everyone, going through your day, your week, your month, try to keep this in mind. Be open to opening your heart and all that comes with it. And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. Hope you're enjoying the show. If you feel like you're benefiting from the show and want to show your support, you can support us on our Patreon page and a link in the show notes. Please like and follow us on social media and help us spread the word by reposting our posts and telling others about the show. You can leave comments on the website at www.graciejujitsurocks.com. You can also go to iTunes and leave comments as well as rate the show, and we would appreciate a 5-star rating, which helps us with our standing in iTunes. You can also leave comments on our YouTube channel. If you have suggestions for the show, please don't hesitate to give those. We always like feedback and suggestions. Okay, that's going to do it. So until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.